ready and come on in. We have a few things to announce for today, and our primary point is this. We have had a great deal of conversation in recent weeks about the future of public safety in Kansas City. I think we have gotten to a point in that conversation where we need to ask the people where they stand, what they think, and what they think is important for the future of Kansas City, Missouri. That's why today I'm announcing and introducing an ordinance that will place a ballot question on the November 3rd ballot in Kansas City, Missouri, if approved by council, that would ask the following question in reference to local control of the Kansas City Police Department. Very simple terms, it'll say the following. Shall the city of Kansas City, Missouri establish as a city legislative priority in the Missouri General Assembly the pursuit of a state legislative or referendum action that will return mayor and city council-led control to the Kansas City Police Department rather than the current control of the Kansas City Police Department by a committee comprised of 4 members appointed by the governor of Missouri and an additional position held by the mayor of Kansas City. We'll make sure that you all have access to that ballot question as well. A few reasons why we're here today and a few reasons why we're acting. The first thing I want to note is this. We need to figure out how we bring our community together long term. There are a lot of good men and women in the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. There are a lot of good people in our community. We need to find a way that we build a police department and build a community where there's trust between all sides, where we're able to solve crime, and we certainly know our violent crime challenges in our city, and frankly, where people of all races, including black men and women in Kansas City, feel safe, not just safe in their communities, but safe in police interactions. And to the extent that someone feels that there was an interaction that did not go in their favor, or was adverse or anything of that sort, that they have an opportunity to have an accountable force, that there will be review, and that there will be some way that there's better responsibility long term. I think this is but one of many steps for us to go in that direction. I would also note that those steps, and part of the reason we're here today, relates to some of the people who stand behind me and certainly people who have been out in our community for weeks on end. I'll first note there are people who for years have been saying that Kansas City should look to how we build better relationships between our police department and our community. There's some in the police department who say that very thing as well, and they've done important work in that regard. But I also want to make sure that we're thanking those who have made their voices heard in recent weeks. Those have included members of our clergy, our black clergy, who were on the steps a little bit further down a few weeks ago, who gave a list of demands and instructions largely relating to accountability, but also taking concrete steps towards at least asking questions and figuring out whether local control was in the future for Kansas City. That includes protesters and a number of different organizations, but One Struggle KC, Black Lives Matter, a number of others who have said that they want to see enhanced accountability. They want to see further conversations about local control. And there's another reason why I think we needed to take this action today. Every few years, and my predecessor had a committee and a task force that looked over it. Others in the past have had committees and task forces that looked over it. I actually recently read a Missouri Supreme Court opinion from 1955 about local control of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. I thought that it was time and it was important for us to ask Kansas City if this is a legislative priority that they are interested in, that they're interested in us pursuing, to make sure that we have a real opportunity to talk about the merits, perhaps the drawbacks, the way local control would look, all those sorts of things, so that when we go either to the General Assembly or to the governor's office, we actually have some clear direction from the people of Kansas City. I'll make a few other points and then stand for questions. One of those is that this is only one bit of the broader change that I know I'm committed to, that the City Council is committed to, the Board of Police Commissioners, the Chief of Police, and a number of others. We have heard loud and clear that there are people that want to have better relationships and want us to have better relationships between police and their community. And I'll also be clear on this. The Kansas City Police Department will continue to exist in 5 years and in 10 years. What we need to make sure we're doing is seeing a way that it exists in a manner where a community can feel like it trusts what's happening at the department, feels like they can ask questions about what's happening at the department, and feels like that where necessary, changes can be made, and that can be a community voice that's being heard. Another point that I think is important for us is this, that at this time where people often say that you need to take sides and do one thing or another, I want the people of Kansas City to be able to say that, well, we're giving them a chance to actually speak. This isn't Quinton Lucas making a decision. It isn't 5 police commissioners. It isn't just a city council. It's all of you. And it's all of you having the chance to make that choice for the future of our community. We will continue to have a public safety study group that I had appointed. It was introduced in council resolution by Councilwoman Melissa Robinson. They will meet through the summer. Their charge was already amended a bit by City Council before to look not only at the question of whether or not to have local control, but also, and equally importantly, to make sure if it were to occur in Kansas City, what would it look like? What is the direction to be given? I'll be asking that committee to accelerate their work somewhat through the summer months to make sure that we have a better handle on what that might look like, and frankly how we avoid what I think are a number of the pitfalls that occurred in the city of St. Louis in connection with the local control question and the transfer from state control to local control of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. We also will have the following discussion at City Council. As you may know, for those who've covered City Hall for years or watched us, this ballot question doesn't have to actually be approved by City Council until August 20th of this summer. I'll refer it to our special committee of legal review, but I would hope over time, and I'd imagine the entire City Council and indeed the entire community can look at the types of language that we'd like to have in the question, can have their own input into the ballot question itself, and then I would hope in the November election everybody who's able to vote and eligible to vote comes out to vote, not just for the presidential election, the gubernatorial one, but also on this important issue in Kansas City. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have. As usual, I'll go from right to left, kind of my thing. Lisa, do you have anything?
Sure. So this is essentially what established local control as a formal priority of the city moving forward. Is that clear?
Yes. So this would, I will be clear that we can't, even with a public vote here in Kansas City, right, change local control or change the method of control of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. This would be an important step, and I think a key and different step, because I do think there's a difference between me calling the governor and saying, hey, Quinton Lucas would be interested in local control. Instead, I think what we would say is if it is a successful vote or if it's in the affirmative, then the people of Kansas City have said loud and clear that this is a priority of theirs. And if it's in the negative and the people of Kansas City say they like the current system, I think that resolves a lot of issues for us as well. And so this is a question relating to whether we will set a legislative priority. There actually is case law about binding versus non-binding election issues. I think the binding effect of this this election issue is really in, will this be at the top of our legislative priorities or not in the 2021 Missouri General Assembly?
And what have you heard from the rest of your commissioners and from the chief of police? Are they open to this conversation as well? Do they support this move?
So at the Board of Police Commissioner level and the Chief of Police, I did not have a chance to talk to the Chief of Police today. My Chief of Staff did. I think, and I'll say this again, that the Chief of Police has a challenging job. And I think he also understands, however, that there are political decisions made either by the Board of Police Commissioners, the Missouri General Assembly, or the City Council that he doesn't necessarily try to get in their lane in the same way that I know at times he may not want others in his. And so while we certainly have informed him of this, I think this is really a question for the people of Kansas City and not a question for Quinton Lucas or Rick Smith to answer alone. It's a question for the people of Kansas City to answer. And I think the Board of Police Commissioners would see that same viewpoint. Yes, ma'am. Well, in recent weeks, I've had a lot of people that have said, we want you to push for this, or we want you to fight for it. Indeed, it was actually a campaign issue. Both myself and Councilwoman Justice actually talked a good deal about it a year ago. I think the challenge is, how do you do it? And too often, I think this isn't unique to this issue, but frankly, it's something you catch in American politics all the time. We kind of would tell people, well, this is the challenge. You have to go to the General Assembly, get a statewide referendum issue, and so it seems really hard, so nothing happens. I hope that people see the step we're taking today to mean and to show something is happening. First of all, we want to hear from you. After we hear from you, I think that allows me my next conversation with the governor after November 3rd, or the governor-elect. My next conversation with any of our members of the state legislature would be something to the effect of, this is an important and key priority for Kansas City, and it's something we're going to continue to focus on and care about, not just in this General Assembly, but in future ones if successful.
So what's the timetable like? If voters say, yes, we want to move forward with local control, what can they expect?
So if voters say yes, the General Assembly would start in early January. We would, with our lobbying team in Kansas City that speaks to any number of issues every year, would instruct them to start those conversations with every member of the Missouri General Assembly and the governor's office. I'd imagine I would talk to, again, the governor or the governor-elect at that time. And then we would see what political steps are necessary to try to get that on a statewide ballot for an issue, or to see if there are any other opportunities for us. The way the path went in St. Louis was that they had some particular, I think, support in the Missouri legislature from a significant donor who helped in connection with putting the issue before the people of Missouri, and then there was a vote thereafter. So we're still looking at a process that's probably at its fastest a year. But at the same time, this would allow us to say that by November of 2021, we could be in a position of looking at a statewide vote on an issue like this one.
I have two questions.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that an election, a citywide election, would come down to racial divide, whereas people up north might think that it's okay, people south of the river might have different because their interaction with the police has been different? So do you think it would come down to north versus south? And my second question is, what was the single event that had you say, hey, we got to move on this problem?
So I think on the first question as to will there be particular racial polarization in this question, particularly north versus south in our city, and I would say I think not. And this is the reason. I just ran for mayor, it feels like yesterday. I was able to get almost half the vote in the Northland. A number of black mayors who've run before have done well too. And so I think in every part of our city, even majority white parts of our city, people will look to the question objectively as to, do they think that this is the right path for the city of Kansas City? I know that there will be different views in some constituencies of the city, and that's to be expected in politics. But, you know, I saw the protests like you did. There were a lot of white people out there too. And so I don't think that it will necessarily be a black-white issue. I don't think it'll necessarily be a north-south issue. I hear from people from throughout our city each day who say that they see needs for more accountability, or they may see needs for change on any number of issues. And I certainly, as this campaign goes on in the fall, would be, and I think everybody behind me would as well, would be interested in helping to host forums in every part of the city and helping to host community conversations in every part of the city. So people can ask a real question of, is this the right idea or not? You know, I'm a black man, and I'm somebody who, when I look at the St. Louis experience and local control of their police department, see a lot of challenges. See a city that after they got local control, I think in the mid-20-teens, right, has seen an increase in homicides year over year almost consistently, has run into the same police brutality challenges that existed before in the city of St. Louis. And so I've said a number of times, it's no panacea. So I think we will have to actually make sure we discuss all those tough topics, and regardless of race in this city, I expect everybody to be a part of that, and frankly to be open-minded in connection with it in the same way that I think the mayor and the city council are as well. And then as to your second question, you'll have to remind me.
What was the single issue that said, we got to do something?
You know, the single issue that told me we have to do something was, you know, it might have been when I was out here on these steps and there was a very significant protest. And I actually talked to someone. This wasn't something that the cameras caught, but I was explaining how things work, right? And I'm an attorney, so I'm kind of used to basically crushing people's dreams all the time. But, you know, there's a young woman, she was asking, well, you're the mayor, why can't you do something about it? And I said, well, you know, we've got this group and there's this process and all these steps. And after a while, you get tired of telling everybody there are all these steps, right? And you know this better than I have. You know, telling everybody, keep waiting. Telling everybody, all right, we'll figure it out. Telling everybody, well, maybe there'll be the right legislature someday. That's, you know, I think people are tired of waiting. If you looked at this movement that just happened, people are very tired of waiting on things like better accountability, on hearing their voices heard. And so that's why you've seen us do a lot of things. That's why you saw the marijuana issue pass 2 days ago in committee, or yesterday in committee. It's because people are tired of waiting nonstop, at least without seeing a path. And so this doesn't do everything, don't get me wrong. But this at least lays out a path to the woman's question from just a moment ago of where we can go. And if the public says, no, we don't like this path, I respect the public in Kansas City. If the public says, Lucas, we want you and the council and others to work harder towards getting this, then I'll expect that to be our next step of the path. But that's how it is. It was that interaction, and frankly, you know, not just since I've been mayor, since I passed the bar exam, I have spent so much of my life telling people kind of what are all the challenges to you doing something, or to getting acquitted, or getting money from an accident, or whatever else. I think this is an important step for us to say, we're not making you wait forever.
Mayor, what constitutes, to use your phrase, a loud and clear voice from the voters? 52, 48, larger than that?
Well, I'll say this. I could become mayor of Kansas City with a vote of 50% plus one person. So I would actually think that a simple majority is something that gives us some level of an answer. Clearly, 90% vote would tell us one thing, and a 10% vote would tell us another. But we listen to the public's voice on the public safety sales tax, all types of things, and I would think that if there is a simple majority that's in support here, then that would tell us a lot about where we should go in connection with the issue.
50 plus 1 is a loud and clear voice?
I would say, Michael, in every other referendum we've had, for example, the initiative petition is a process we can use for any number of things, right? Having about 51 or 52% got us the East Side sales tax for 10 years, right? And so I actually do think that's a loud and clear and important voice. If the people of Kansas City can, through their actions in a number of different situations, compel the expenditures of tens of millions of dollars, if they can do any number of things, then I would think a majority here speaks to that as well.
So you're going to go ahead and, on a close vote and make this, if not the top priority, one of the top priorities?
I'm going to listen to what the public. So the answer is yes. I'm going to listen to what the public has to say, and if the public has to say we want to move that way, just like every other election in America, except the presidential one, ironically, then we will actually move that way.
But if it's close, sir, what about the Constitution protecting minority rights in that, minority in the sense of the people who come out on the prevailing side?
I think in terms of protecting minority rights, and if they didn't come out on the prevailing side, there are still a number of steps that we'd have to go through. There's a duly elected governor of Missouri who will have to sign off on any bill that would allow for a public vote. There is a legislature. There are all types of other steps at issue. So that's why I wouldn't pretend to say that this is a done deal or anything of that sort after the vote. I think what it's saying is, what position should Kansas City be in thereafter?
One final question. How much more helpful do you believe it would have been to have a solid affirmative voice from the police chief and the board of commissioners on this? Because it doesn't sound like you have it.
Here's the deal. First of all, we task the police chief with doing a lot of things. His job is not to be the chief politician in Kansas City, Missouri, right? I got elected to that. And so this is the sort of thing that is my job. These are the sorts of things I'm supposed to introduce. These are the sorts of things that the city council is supposed to deliberate on, and then if it goes to the voters, that they'll vote on. So I actually think that there's no real conflict in connection with what our roles in this charter system are. In terms of the Board of Police Commissioners, I think that they also recognize what their roles are. They're appointed to make sure that the police department is functioning, is operational, is accountable, and those are the steps that we'll continue to take at our next regular police board meeting in July.
I've got one more.
All right. Yes, sir?
Yeah, there have been 90 homicides this year in the city. Do you think local control will help prevent?
I think that's an important part of our question. Does local control on its own help prevent them? I don't think necessarily. My answer there would be from the city of St. Louis, right? Getting local control did not reduce the number of homicides in St. Louis. However, I certainly think that there are always different approaches one can take to violent crime in a community, and perhaps different political voices, perhaps the city council working on the issue or some other group or entity might give us a different approach to how we address violent crime. I think whatever you say, particularly as it relates to homicides and non-fatal shootings, it's not working right now. And the it in that is actually just the way we're doing things. And I don't say that as a criticism, particularly on this chief or this mayor or this board of police commissioners. It's something that has been an issue for as long as I've been alive in Kansas City, since the mid-1980s. And so I think it's something that we do need to make sure that we're working on. And I think it's very relevant to the local control question. One other point to that is that's the reason why, and this was a change that I made, this public safety study group's mission is not just local control. It is also, how do we actually try to come up with tools that make Kansas City safer? What are priorities that we're looking to make Kansas City safer? I've gotten some flack for putting a former police chief on that task force. But I thought it was important to have a police officer on that task force because we need to make sure we're using every option necessary to try to address, I think, long-term public safety issues, because at the core, to me, this is a public safety question, right? It isn't just about politics or which building does what. It's about how we can make Kansas City safer long-term, which I think Kansas Cityans want. Yes, ma'am.
We need
You know, I think for better or worse, we're having a big budget discussion anyway. COVID-19 allowed us to have that, and so you'll probably see yesterday in City Council, we had a discussion about the budget. This afternoon in City Council, we'll have a discussion about the budget as it relates to all of our departments, including the Kansas City Police Department. In terms of what local control would look like, I think that's something that we'll charge this task group on working on. I think that would be something that we would also talk to the state legislature, the governor about thereafter. There are a number of different ideas ranging from they just become a city department, like the Kansas City Fire Department, for example, to others who've said there should be an appointment of a commissioner in every district of the city, and you'd have 6 commissioners plus 1 mayoral appointee. There are a number of different ideas. I think step one is this where the people of Kansas City want to go? And that's why we're, I think, bringing this issue now.
Well, people are going to ask, what's this going to cost us? Do you have some sort of like ballpark?
I have no belief that it would cost us more. I think for years, Kansas City Council, the Board of Police Commissioners and others have tried to see in what ways we can have cost savings from unifying certain operations, be it information technology, others like HR. I hope we continue that process regardless of the method of control, but certainly that's something that we would look to. I have my own pet peeve, and it doesn't actually relate necessarily to the police department, but if you think of the number of entities that the Kansas City, Missouri taxpayer supports, Kansas City Police Department, Kansas City Area Transportation Authority, Kansas City Streetcar, City Hall, all of these others that in many ways have different directors, different groups, executive directors in different places. I think a taxpayer could ask after a while, how many different administrative costs do we have from professional services, from having different leadership, all of that over time? So I would actually think that there might be a potential for cost savings, at least on the administrative side, but I haven't run those numbers yet. Yes, ma'am.
Two quick things. So first of all, you talked about how in a best case scenario, we're talking a year minimum, before anything could potentially move forward. So what happens in that year to address some of the other concerns that have been brought forward? That pledge that you signed on to by the protesters saying we need much more done than just
Sure. You know, I talked to our my fellow commissioners on the Board of Police Commissioners more than you might think. I visited with one just yesterday. I talked to the chief of police a lot. I think we all recognize that, yeah, we can't just sit back and wait to address any number of issues. You know, every week at City Council, and I saw my colleague Eric Bunch here before, every week at City Council you are seeing council members and the mayor, right, who are introducing, I think, new provisions that can address long-term concerns. I plan to, at our next Board of Police Commissioners, to address several of the issues I talked about last time. Greater accountability through the Office of Community Complaints, some of the tactics we use in de-escalation. I think you'll continue to see those types of issues, and frankly, how we can communicate in more situations better with the community. That work doesn't stop, and that work doesn't just wait on the referendum in November or a statewide referendum in November of 2021, which I think should be our clear goal, if successful. But I think what we need to do in the meantime is continue to see, first of all, how do we keep people from getting shot in our city, which is a priority, I think, for all of us in this city, police, community, everyone. But then second, how do we make sure, and actually not second, relatedly to that, how do we make sure that people feel like that we're all accountable to them, right? When people complain to the mayor or city council, right, we go out, we have more meetings, that sort of thing. I know that's the work that we're pushing the police department to do, and I will say this, because they've been subject to a lot of criticism lately. I was visiting with 18th and Vine business owners the other day. Right after that, I talked to the major over the Central Patrol Division of Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. I believe on Friday we're having a meeting of the police department, community members, and others. That's the sort of quick action, accountability, I think, and respect that we want to see between community, business owners, individuals, so many others. And that's what I'll expect over the next year, and regardless of what our future is, I'll expect for us to see more of that. With
I know the community of the tower have obviously been greatly impacted with the COVID-19 crisis as well. We've seen uptick in case numbers recently. Any discussion or consideration to mask requirements?
Yep. Yeah, Kansas City, Missouri is absolutely considering a requirement of masks in buildings. We have not made a final decision yet. I have talked to Dr. Rex Archer, our health director, today on the issue. As I understand it, health directors of all of our metro regions and all of our counties are considering such an issue. I will say this, and this is said with respect to everyone. I think I made it clear that I was disappointed a while back when everyone still had percentage capacity limits and all of that, and there were some counties in this metro that abandoned them, including Johnson County, Kansas. I don't think that was good for the metropolitan area. And I would hope that if we look to something like a mask requirement, that all counties look into it and not just kind of saying, well, we suggest you do it. Because I think that, and actually, to get into the COVID issue, I went to lunch with a friend of mine on the Kansas side. And I was in some ways astonished. I was in Johnson County by the fact that servers weren't wearing masks, right? It didn't seem like social distancing rules were being followed. This is the very sort of thing that can cause an outbreak. And as somebody whose city borders Johnson County, I find it troubling. And so I hope the health directors come out with some united advice for us later this afternoon, and then we would hope to act accordingly thereafter. Michael, you had a question?
Why do you think that decision's going to come this afternoon?
I think I'd expect some decision by 4 o'clock or 4:30 this afternoon, at least from them. I plan to health directors throughout our region and at least formal recommendations. We'll look to have some recommendation for the public likely on Friday, but no later than Monday, on what Kansas City's next phase of its order will be. Okay? Yes, go on ahead.
Just one question. So you said you addressed a lot of the issues that St. Louis has had.
Yep.
Not wanting to make those same mistakes. Is there a city or a place in the United States that you're looking at to maybe emulate local control for better?
So, the issue is so many police departments have local control, right? That there are some departments that are getting a lot of negative attention now and have local control, the city of Minneapolis. There are some that I've heard positive reports on, reforms in Oakland, for example, or in Camden, New Jersey, the change in policing that was made there. I think we'll look at all options on the table. I think the first question, though, is what does the public and what do the people of Kansas City want to do? And we'll make sure we address that. Lisa, I'll give you a last question.
We are exactly 1 month from the day that George Floyd was killed, which kind of brought these conversations to the forefront. Can you just reflect for a little bit on how you're feeling and how you feel, how you're feeling about the reforms and the conversations we've had today?
I said on these steps a while back, the revolution will not be televised, and I don't think people understood my point. It wasn't that, we were going to go march on the Bastille or something. It was instead that we will have weekly steps with what we're doing, and there will be a lot of steps along the way. This is one step. We'll have more steps 2 weeks from now. We'll have more steps 4 weeks from now. And so I guess what I feel is a little positive that we're still making moves, a little positive that I think a broad base of the community, and ever since giving out my cell phone number, I hear from everybody, right? Folks from my community in the 3rd District, majority black, folks who are Kansas City police officers, folks who live in Harrisonville and want to let me know what they think about everything. I think people understand that this moment is an important one and that we shouldn't miss it and that we shouldn't just think that everything's fixed in a second. And so that's how I feel in kind of my politician, public servant way. In my personal way, as a black man in Kansas City and somebody who's seeing all of that, something else I've said is that, I've compared this moment to the Los Angeles riots and the whole 28 years thing. I have a little more optimism that 28 years from now we'll see some real changes. I think we've seen some votes in my city council. I think we've heard some discussions out of the Board of Police Commissioners that show that people are interested in change. And frankly, the people behind me, the people all around us in the community, I think they've shown a commitment to some level of change. And I will say this, a lot of our police officers that I've talked to have also said, hey, we recognize there's a moment now too, and that we see in some areas needs for improvement, in other areas maybe ways that we can communicate more. That's what we need. And we're seeing that, and I think that's positive for Kansas City. And frankly, I would like to see Kansas City as a model for how we go forward. Because I'm just throw a little bit of shade, not too much, and this is where my people get mad at me. So the Minneapolis City Council voted real quick, we're going to dismantle the police department. And then all of a sudden, right, they're like, oh, well, we didn't really mean it that way. Right? That's why I don't run the hyperbole. And I know sometimes people get mad at me and say, no, you're supposed to declare one way or the other. No, I believe that we make sustained changes, particularly in those areas we can. For me as a lawmaker, that includes the laws that we have in this city. For me as a police commissioner, that means looking at policies and procedures of the Board of Police Commissioners. And me as mayor, that means looking at ways we can change and involve the public up to and including a referendum to ask them their view on local control long term. That's how we make a change, and that's where I hope, and how I hope, we won't see tragedies like George Floyd's murder. I hope we won't see tragedies like that in Kansas City in the future, and I hope there are a lot of people that are looking at us 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now and saying, Kansas City got it right. On homicides, Kansas City got it right on police-community relations. Kansas City got it right on how we keep people involved. Thank you all. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. All right.
Hey, Justice, can I get a word with you?
Let me get these all untangled. There we go.
I'll look through the whole list. Mayor.
They want to talk.
Yeah, we love to grab one of you guys. I mean, it doesn't matter who, but.
318.
Someone
Take
step
some of
up.
the protest. Some of the protest leaders. That might be a good spot. Justice, any questions?
Yeah, we-